Hey there, gang. Have you ever had something bottled up in your chest and you just had to get it out? Well, today we're going to find out what that truly is. Welcome to Head Game. Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is the Zombie Apocalypse, and when an alien pops out of your chest, that's called being Steve.
Hello again, friends and opponents. I'm Jetterex, your friendly local campfire bard. My stage name is Tim.
Sweet. If only you could have had the time to sing us a great ballad. This deck is actually a
Someday
ballad.
we get enough likes and favorites and comments and stuff. I'll sing a song to everybody.
Hey, I know you're capable. So thank you for joining us on the Head Games Commander podcast, where we talk about Magic the Gathering Commander format. Tim, what are we talking about today?
So today's time for another Commander Spotlight. You all know the drill by now. We're going to review one of our latest Commander decks. We're going to describe the deck strategy, what we love about the Commander, highlight some of our favorite cards from the deck. So today's deck was built by Zombie. It is from Modern Horizons 3. So I'm going to let Zombie tell us who the Commander is and what the Rule Zero conversation for this Commander sounds like.
Sweet. So the deck that I am bringing for us today is Herigast, the Erupting Nullkite. He is a 9-mana Eldrazi dragon who's a 6/6 with the ability Emerge for 6 and 2 red. And I'll explain what Emerge is right here. It says you may cast this spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by the creature's mana value. When you cast this spell, you may exile your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards. He's a flyer, and then each creature spell you cast has Emerge. The Emerge cost is equal to its mana cost. Boy, the only reason why I picked this as my commander is for that last line of text.
Yep.
I think it's just such a cool idea. Little sad it's mono red. This was a very tricky deck for me to build. But the Rule Zero conversation that I have about it is all we're doing is playing a big old game of peekaboo. So basically all I'm trying to do is play smaller creatures and then have giant creatures pop out their chest. Hence why it's called being Steve.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. It's surprising that this commander is just this mono color because especially what with the Emerge originally showing up and I think Shadows over Innistrad,
It was
and at the
blue, I think.
time it was blue and black, and
Right.
I'm not sure if there were red versions of the creature in that set. I'd have to
I'm
go
not
back and look.
sure.
I don't believe so, but there might have been. But it was strictly like if it was 3 colors, it was Grixis. It was blue, black, and red. So there's a part of me that's like, I'm wondering why this isn't that. I mean, it fits into a couple of those different things. I mean, it's mono red with the exile your hand in order to draw 3 cards, but
Mhm.
I mean, listen, we've seen what it can do. We know it's got a decent power level just adding that last line of text, but I wonder what it would look like if it was more than one color.
I actually really enjoyed the challenge of building mono red. Like my
Yeah.
2 least favorite colors are red and white. So, and this commander just spoke to me because it's just like, let's play big dumb fatties. Like I like sacrificing things, so let's see what we can come up with during this thing. So like it was a really fun challenge. I did need some help. Tim definitely led me in the right direction with some of the card picks. Because I had trouble with the lower end because I'm great with big dumb fatties, but when it comes to like the good value cards early on in red, I was struggling really hard with.
And
Especially like the
I think
ramp pieces and stuff.
I think that's like a deck building challenge for this kind of thing. I remember the Emerge deck from that time, like in standard, and you really do need a certain amount of low end creatures that get you enough value just by existing. And then hopefully they have some enters triggers, they have some dies triggers. If they have both, it's amazing, and we'll see some of those. That you need that at the front end in order to get you where you're going. But once your commander is on board, boy, as long as you have a couple of creatures to sacrifice to it, it really
Mhm.
spirals.
Yeah. So I would say there's definitely some strengths and weaknesses to the deck. One of the strengths to the deck is, man, it snowballs so hard. Once I get like basically like a chain of creatures going, like it almost feels unstoppable because like I will emerge a big creature, which when I cast that creature, it might make multiple copies of itself when it enters. So then I have two more creatures that I can then pop out of its chest. And like then I have cards when I cast it, I'm drawing cards. So like I refill my hand once it's empty because I'm have the low end, and then I refill it with either Herigast with exiling my hand and drawing the three cards, or I refill it with other creatures in the deck that we most likely will talk about later. And then it just keeps on going. It just it's pretty great. I would say one of the weaknesses are like if you wipe my board a couple of times, like I'm not really going to be emerging a whole lot anymore. I will be just hard casting these fatties, which I mean still is pretty good, but like I experienced a heartbreaking turn in a future episode of Commander with Randos that you guys will be able to see. And but that's the weakness. If I don't have like my hand really matters, so I need to have either fatties or small or and small creatures. I can't just have one or the other.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that I mean, if I had to identify a strength, I know that it is like so many other decks of this type. Like if you run out of steam, it is very hard for you to get back in there. Now that being said, the commander does have that baked in. If you're completely out of steam in a vacuum, hellbent, empty
Yep.
board, and you can manage to get the mana cost for your commander, you're gonna get back in. You're
Mhm.
gonna draw three more cards. So I actually think it's got a surprising level of resilience to it. And I think we saw that in the last game that we played
Right.
with it,
Yeah.
where there definitely were some board wipes going on, and some targeted removal. We're trying to slow your deck down, and it kept going. Cast your commander more than once in a turn. That
Yeah.
it's pretty brutal when you see that it's like single targeted removal puts your commander back in the command zone, and then you're like, well, I'll just
Thank you.
emerge it again.
Yeah. And with the way emerge works, it like can get uh past the commander tag. So like I have a creature
Right.
that costs 9 in here. Let me look him up real quick. He costs 9, and if you cast him from your hand, you get multiple copies of him. It is Skitterbeam Battalion. So if I were to emerge him, so he only costs like 3 or 4. I'm getting 2 or 3 4 4 trample haste, and then clearly it's just that. But then if I were to then use one of those tokens to emerge him out, like that's paying for 2 of the commander tax already.
Right.
So 2 red and 1 gets my commander out again. Pretty sweet.
Yeah, and that's what's wild about it, is especially that. I mean, it's funny because I don't know that Skitter being made the cut in terms of the cards we're going to talk about today,
I don't think
but
it
it's
did, but
fantastic,
yeah.
especially when you get to, well, we can put it up on the screen now. If we
Yeah,
haven't
it'll be there.
already. Yeah, I mean, this card's fantastic in this deck because if you cast it, like even for its emerge cost, you are casting it for the full board. So you get 3 copies of this card and the mana value that goes along with it. So that with your commander on board means you have, what's the main mana cost of Skitterbean? 7, 9?
9, 9. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's 27 mana value on the board. And when all of your creatures are emerge, that means you now have 27 mana value to emerge new creatures on
Even
board.
if I
So
prototype it, that's still 15 mana worth of stuff.
that's right. That's right. For five, you get 15. It's one of the most mana like efficient cards in the deck for
Yeah,
sure.
it's the way this deck
As far
calculates mana is really cool.
It is. It's very unique. As far as weaknesses go, I think that this is probably a pretty basic take on this. But I mean, it's a monocolored deck. So your removal suite is challenged as a result of that. And I think that, the inclusions that you've made in terms of
I
single targeted removal and in terms of board wipes, it's the cream of the crop. At the end of the day, that's not actually saying a whole lot. Like
right.
they're really like we
I
did,
yeah.
you have the best that's available, but it's still a little on the short side, or
Mhm.
because they're either incredibly expensive,
Right.
which a lot of them are, or they're, mediocre in terms of what they're actually capable of removing. Obviously, this deck's going to have a pretty hard time with enchantments.
I think
And it does.
I have three things that might take care of enchantments.
Sure, which
Um,
honestly for mono red
pretty
feels
good.
great.
Pretty good.
you you got three, that's great.
Yeah.
But those are the things that you also have. A lot of commander decks are going to have cards specifically for enchantment artifact removal, whereas this one, it has to use its best removal spells in order to remove them. So it lacks in the removal suite, but there's just nothing for that. There's no way around that. That's
Right.
just the nature
That's
of
just
being
the
in
perks of
this.
mono red. Yeah.
Yep.
So before we get into the stat sections, I did want to mention I did run this through Hard Realms, and it said the power level was only a 6. Um, I'm a firm believer that this is more of a 7, close to an 8. I don't.
So, I mean, we run the decks through card realms for the closest thing to an objective number as we can get, because that is that's not somebody basing their power level on feelings
Right.
or what, their perception of how good the deck is. That is based on an actual mathematic algorithm.
Right.
So, we like to run that through there. What we have discovered about the card realms method, though, is that it highly incentivizes pieces that are considered to be good in competitive EDH,
Right.
including tutors and stacks pieces.
Right.
So if you are low on those things, if you have very few tutors and or very few stacks pieces and or very few or no fast mana, it's gonna give you a lower power level because
Right.
it highly values those things.
Right.
So we don't traditionally play with a lot of those things, trying to keep it as casual as we can. So even though it's saying this deck is a 6, it's very capable of doing stuff that seems very powerful. But in terms of time, I think we've seen this a lot lately. Even though our decks we consider them high power casual, our games are going to turn 7, 8, 9.
I mean,
Like
I
that.
think,
That's about
yeah, 9, 10 even.
that's when the games are ending, and really that's what we want. We want a game that has
Some
that where
body to
everybody
it.
spends some time doing it, some body
Yeah.
to it, right?
Yeah.
So all right, so looking at the stats, we like to give like the basic stats, the things that most traditional decks are looking to include. And so we'll give the basic stats first, and then we'll move into, card selections from each of those stats. So Zombie, tell us, what are the basic stats for this deck?
So the stats for this deck are card draw is 22, ramp is 16, single target removal is 7, and board wipes is 3. So some of the card draw isn't the greatest card draw. Um, but like it's cards that don't necessarily gain me cards. But like if it says draw a card and it's like net neutral card, like card evaluation wise, it still counts as card draw. So yes, there's 22, but there's not like a crazy amount. And
Right,
ramp is I just have a lot of things that make treasures. So
right.
they all count that as ramp. So I actually like these stats. Like honestly, like these stats feel really good because every time that I've played this deck so far, and I've only played it like 2 or 3 times, I've never had an empty hand. I've never
Yep.
felt like I was behind on board mana wise. Um, so like it felt pretty solid. There's been plenty of times where I've had plenty of responses for the things that I needed. So like honestly, these stats felt really, really good.
Yeah, I think you're right in the pocket there in terms of like single targeted removal and board wipes, and the fact that you have 7 and 3 of those in a monocolor deck is fairly impressive. But that seems to me to be right around the good number. in terms of actually interacting with the game and feeling like you're doing something. And and it's something to be said about like there being a critical mass of cards that give you a little bit of mana advantage, like the cards that make treasures, or cards that just draw you a card, right? Like
Mhm.
incidentally draw you a card.
Yeah.
So there's, a fifth of the deck, 22 cards out of 100 have draw a card somewhere in their text box. And that really turns out to be a meaningful incremental advantage.
Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and go into cards that we like from each category. So Tim, what was the first card? What's your card draw pick from this?
So the card draw card that I picked is Sandstone Oracle. This is a 7 mana artifact creature that happens to be a Sphinx. It's a 4/4 flyer. When it enters, choose an opponent. If that player has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. I think it fits so well with the theme of the deck. Being a 7 mana artifact creature means if your commander is on board, there's lots of ways to make this super cheap or even free. There's almost always somebody at the table who has an enormous amount of cards in their hand. So this turns into an equalizer to get you caught back up. Happens also to be a 4/4 flying creature. So it itself is one of those cards like you talked about, where this enters, refills your hand, and then you can emerge the next thing right on the back of
Dude,
it.
it's so good. Like,
Yeah,
well, so also another nice thing about it is I have ways to make token copies of creatures that are either in my
that's right.
graveyard or in my in play. So like
That's right.
I can just reuse it several times. And
Yep.
like holy moly, this card in the last game that we played, I think drew me a total of 14.
Yep. Unsurprising. Yeah.
Seems awesome.
And if you have that, and I was playing in that game, and I was that guy. I
You
was
were the
that guy who
guy.
I was that guy who had a reliquary tower on board and had like 10-ish cards in my hand at just about every time. So Sandstone Oracle could just kept doing its thing.
Oh. So my card draw card uh isn't the greatest card draw because it could also just not draw me anything, but if it's not drawing me anything, it is doing amazing things. And the card I picked was Combustible Gearhawk. He is a 6 mana artifact. It's 4 and 2 red. He is a 6/6 first strike. When Combustible Gearhawk enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If the player doesn't, you mill the 3 cards. Then Combustible Gearhawk deals damage equal to the total mana value of those cards. Man, this deck, so it has 5, 9, 10 plus 5 is 15 plus another 16 cards over 6. You're gonna get hurt so bad. Just let
It's
me draw
true.
the 3
Like,
cards.
yeah, the ceiling for well, actually, like that's a bad choice too. It just is. Like, and this is I mean, these kind of effects where you're giving the opponent a choice, they oftentimes seem really bad. They just do.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, like if you'd have told me when Kaladesh came out that the Gear Hulk I was going to see the most often was the red one, I'd have absolutely called you a
I
liar.
would have laughed in
But
your face.
I swear to God, it is the one, and maybe it's just because you like it a lot
I
and I
love
like it
this
a lot,
card.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so you put it, and again, here's another example of a card that is uniquely appropriate for this deck because it is a high mana value. It is either going to draw you cards or do damage. It's a great copy target. It's a great emerge target. Like
Mm-hmm.
it is going to emerge into a lot of other big creatures at the top end, especially your red specific creatures. And if it draws you cards, fantastic. If it deals, I mean, 6 to 12 damage, I mean the ceiling is something like 20 plus damage in a single go. So yeah, it's a tough choice for the opponent. When both of the choices feel bad for them, then it feels like a better fit for you as the person playing it.
Wait,
So Combustible Gear Hulk.
have I been playing this wrong? Does it reduce the red too?
Yes, if there is red in the mana value, then yes. If so,
Oh
but
my
it's
god.
tricky. It's tricky
It
because
only
it's
gets rid
like
of red, right?
It only gets rid of red. That's right. So if you were playing, say, another red creature that was a high mana value red creature,
Wow.
it would reduce the red cost as well. It could
I've been playing
ostensibly.
it wrong too, because like
So
there was times where
yeah,
I
you could.
wanted to like bring Kikijiki in, emerge Kikijiki in, and I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, I can only reduce it by 2. I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I am so
you
wrong.
could
Holy moly.
you could. That's right. You could emerge the Kiki off of the back of this for free. I'm fairly sure. I hope we don't get grilled on the comments on this one, but
Well, if
I'm
we're
fairly
wrong,
sure that's
please
how
let
it
us
works.
know. I would love to hear from you guys
You may
if
cast a spell by reduced by that creature's mana value. Interesting. I'll have to look up the words on it. So it says mana value on Herigast, but I remember it reducing the colored mana as well. But
well, so its mana value would be like 4 and 2 red, right?
well,
Because CMC and
that's
mana value became the same thing, right?
yeah, but CMC stands for converted mana
But that doesn't
cost.
exist anymore, does it?
Right, but converted mana cost means it's total, the number that is associated with it. So if it's 4 and 2 red, that's a 6 CMC. So mana value is we'll work on it a little bit. We'll take a look at it. So maybe you haven't been you may have been playing it right, and I'm just thinking about it wrong.
Yeah. Either way, still freaking cool card. So
Absolutely.
so we're gonna go ahead and go into our ramp section. So Tim, what
Mm-hmm.
ramp card did you pick for us today?
So I think this is like when we were building the deck or working on it together. This was my suggestion is that, and you had actually already had this card in it, but I suggested
Yes.
adding more cards like it.
Right.
So the one that you had in there was Patron of the Arts. It is just a common. It's 2 in a red for a 3/1. When it enters or dies, create a treasure token. So the idea here is that this is just right in the sweet spot where you want to be, where putting this on the board on turn 3 gets you a treasure and puts 3 mana value on the board. That then the next turn, because Herigast is what, 8?
Mhm.
So yeah, 1, 2, with a 4th land, you can use the treasure, your 4 lands, and patron to get Herigast on 4. So having a critical mass of 3 mana value or less creatures that also get you a treasure, but actually 3 into treasure on turn 3, 4th land on 4, that's Herigast on 4.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the best version of it because it does it on enters and on dies.
Yeah, I think this is a great pick because again, like the fact that it happens on enters and death, like just makes it so like even if I'm not using the treasures to do something else, this card I pay 3, it nets me 2 back. So really, it only costs me 1 if I'm emerging something else on top of it. So
Mm-hmm.
like even like mid game where it's like okay, this is turn 9, I have plenty of mana, but I can play this for 3 and then get 2 mana back, and it's just as I said, this deck's really cool with the way the math works on how you can cast things and stuff. So again, awesome card. Great ramp piece. So my ramp piece is something similar. It is I almost said Siege Gang Commander. It is Spawn Gang Commander. So this is a 5 mana Eldrazi Goblin. It's 3 and 2 red. It has Devoid, which isn't really relevant, but it's on the card. So when you cast this spell, create 3/0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sacrifice, add 1 colorless. And then you can sack them, pay that in a colorless, sacrifice an Eldrazi, and it deals 2 damage to any target. So I'm not really gonna ever use the second half of this ability, but like so what I do is I play Spawn Gang Commander for 5, whether I emerge it from Patron and only pay 2. I get 3 mana back plus the treasure from Patron. So this card's like a free card.
Right.
And it just like then it reduces my next creature by 5.
Yeah, it really, fits so well into this one. This is a card that otherwise you would look at it for other decks and go, this is just it's fine in a limited format, but probably not good enough in a lot of other places. But right here, and I actually got to say, I think you might use that second ability at some point. This is another one of those targets where
Mhm.
if you have Kiki Jiki or another way to copy this,
It's a
like you
cash
can
trigger.
get an enormous. Oh, is it a cast
It's
trigger?
a cash trigger. It makes me a little sad.
Oh, because Siege Gang isn't. Why did they
No,
do that? Because
because
it's an
it's an
Eldrazi?
Eldrazi.
That's not
Well,
great.
it would
So yeah,
also
so
not be
well,
very good with like, I mean, like just imagine Splinter Twin on this thing. Like you're getting so much mana.
sure.
If it was just an
Oh, because you
ETB.
get mana from them. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay, because you don't get goblins. You get things that make mana, and
Yeah.
that changes the math entirely.
Yeah. It's a little sad that it's cast, but you know what?
But it's perfect. It's still super good right here. It's right where it belongs. It fits so very well into this deck. You know, you cannot argue with that mana efficiency when you're talking about emerging creatures.
It's really cool that like a 5 mana creature is a really great ramp piece.
Right?
So cool. So there was an episode of Commander with Randos that did get uploaded, I think 2 weeks ago or something like that. I did play this wrong. I used it as an ETB, not a cast trigger. So I do apologize. No one mentioned it in the comment section, so I feel like that's a win. But I'm calling it out
I
now.
mean, it just they designed it just like Siege Gang Commander. I would never have guessed. I mean, I get it. They do that with almost
Yeah.
all the Eldrazi triggers. So, I mean, it makes it a little better for that reason because you still get the cast trigger
Oh,
even
of
if they try to
course.
counter it.
Yeah.
But so before we move on, I did look up Emerge on the wiki, and it looks like you are actually playing it right. Yeah,
Okay.
the way that it is worded, if you pay this spell's Emerge cost, the total cost is reduced by amount of generic mana equal to the sacrificed permanent's mana value.
Okay.
So it does not count colored mana. It does count colored mana towards the generic reduction.
Right.
So Combustible Gear Hulk could reduce something by 6 generic mana, but
Right.
not 4 and 2 red.
Got it. Okay. So that makes me feel better. I was playing it right all
You were
along.
playing it right.
But still, like, I mean, again, Spawn Gang Commander is 5 mana. So
Yep,
basically this is an 8 mana ramp spell. Just saying.
it is. Yeah.
Just
So
saying.
in so moving on to single targeted removal, I picked a weird one here because I love this card so much, and
It
you know
works.
just recently just recently played this in a standard deck, and I'm just a big fan here. I think it's great here, and it's Terror of the Peaks. We if you have been around a minute, you've seen this card before. 3 and 2 red for a 5/4 flying dragon. Spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target.
Oh.
So that means you can hit other creatures with it, you can hit planeswalkers with it, you can hit people's face with it, whatever you want. It's your Terror of the Peaks.
I will say, I think you
I
did read the mana value wrong. I think it's just 2 red for a 5/4 flying dragon.
what did I say?
2 red, 2 red and 3. I think it's just 2 red because this is going to pop out of something's chest for only 2 red.
Oh, I get it. I see what you did there. Yeah.
Ah, so we got there. We got there.
It's
Yeah.
normally a it's normally a 5 mana value spell. Zombies being really clever and saying that he's going to cast it for free or for cheaper than that.
Of
So
course.
yes. I mean,
Of course.
even more ridiculous if you are emerging this for just 2 red and then chaining several other things behind it that are the big
Mhm.
giant creatures that we're going to talk about in a few minutes.
Yeah. So, my removal spell. I mean, I feel like this card is a given. So
Yep.
I chose Meteor Golem. It is a 7 mana artifact creature golem. It's a 3/3. Whenever it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls. So yes, it's expensive. However, I'm not paying 7 for it. Not once. Never in a million years. So like I'm seeing times where like I have a Kikijiki, I make a copy of it, destroying 2 things. Then I'm sacrificing the token copy to then cast another thing, and then I still have it. Or like well, I don't know. I have a Feldon of the Third Path where I'm going to make a token copy of it from my graveyard after sacrificing it to something else to play something else. So like the lines that this deck has are very complicated on like what you're doing, but it's just so fascinating. Like I have to dive deep into the think tank every time that I've played this, and I'm really enjoying this deck because of it.
Yeah.
So I think the next thing we're going to talk about. Oh, well, did you have anything to add about Meteor Golem? I mean, it's
Yeah, no, I'll just say a very brief piece, which is this, if you're playing in a mono red deck, is kind of a staple. If you're playing an artifact deck, it's kind of a staple. It fits in incredibly well here, and as we were talking about, the one of the weaknesses of this deck is not being able to deal with other specific kinds of threats, planeswalkers, enchantments, things of that nature. Here's your answer. And so getting Meteor Golem and having multiple ways having ways to use it more than once really makes it really makes it incredibly important to this deck. So if you see old Meteor Golem on the board, consider using one of those exile effects on it,
you
because
should definitely
this
use an
deck.
exile effect for sure.
Yeah,
Because
that's right.
I think one of my board wipe that I'm going to be talking about works with this card very well. So we're going to
Of
go into
course.
your board wipe first.
Right.
So please tell me what did you pick?
I think that this, when we talk about red board wipes, this is a relatively new one that we haven't seen a whole lot yet around the tables. I think I really wish that they had nerfed this card a little bit less, because sure, like it. So I'm talking about Spiteful Banditry. It's from Lord of the Rings. It's an X and 2 red. It's an enchantment itself. When it enters, deals X damage to each creature. When one or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn.
Aw.
So like all like they nerfed this so hard. Like one or more creatures your opponents control die. So if you wipe the board, you get one treasure. and
Aw.
it, and it only triggers once a turn. Wait, why did you have to do both? Why couldn't you have just put one of those on there to make it a little bit better, right? Like
Right.
I really feel that I really feel that the ability triggering only once each turn, they've been nailing all sorts of cards with this lately, and I think they could have gotten away with not doing it here. Like just the one or more creatures your opponents control, you create a, because that means if the board gets wiped, you only get one.
Yep.
But if your opponent loops a death trigger, you get a bunch. But alas, it is just one. I still think it's good.
Oh, I love it.
I still think as far as X mana board wipes go, it is going to get you treasure tokens. So there is upside to it. It's basically X damage to all creatures with upside, for
Yeah.
the rest of the game. So
Yeah, I'll
still
take
a
it.
little bit better than a lot of other options. So that was my pick.
I like it because it's a board wipe and a ramp piece. Like, so if I really wanted to, since I'm killing my own stuff, I could pay this for 2 red, and then once each turn when I'm sacrificing a creature to emerge something, I'm getting a treasure out of the deal. Like that seems.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way
Oh,
either.
it says a
Yeah,
permanence. Dang
yeah.
it! I should really read
They,
cards
I'm,
better.
I'm telling you, they went all out to make sure that this card wasn't busted, and in the process, they made it really weak. It's
I still
it's
like it.
still
I still
it's
like
still better than a lot of other X and red destruction, board wipes. It's
it.
still
Mhm.
better, but it could have been a contender, and instead, it's just fine.
It's just dookie. Anyway, so we're gonna go into my board wipe. We talk about this card a lot. I really love
It's
this
only
card.
half a board wipe, by the way.
Uh, I count it as a half a board wipe. We're talking about Portal to Phyrexia again. Um, the reason why I picked this card is when it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. No one cares about that last line of text. However, it's clearing the way for my big dumb fatties. It's getting the
Yep.
big dumb fatties from my graveyard, like Meteor Golem repeatedly, or other great creatures that I have. So heck, I might just steal your creatures and then sacrifice those creatures to play my creatures again. The utility of like I'm not just using it as the 9 mana sacrifice 3 creatures. I'm using both sides of it very, very well. So I think it fits perfectly in
Yeah,
here. I have
totally agree.
I
Yeah.
have so many ramp spells in here. I have so many treasures laying around that why not just try to throw some things that necessarily can't emerge? And I feel like the portal, like maybe the way the emerge works is there's a portal from not Phyrexia but from somewhere else coming out of people's chests. Who knows? I don't
It's
know.
like right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about this plenty. I mean, it really 3 creatures from each person's board is surprisingly effective a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes people go wider than that, but
Mhm.
oftentimes 3 is still really, really tough to deal with. And it's one-sided. You don't say, you the person casting it don't sacrifice those creatures, just your opponents do. And in a deck like this, it's definitely putting creatures in its graveyard and has a lot of creatures that do have, in fact, ETB triggers. Plenty of cast triggers too, but
Mhm.
plenty of ETB triggers to choose from. So being able to reuse those things, excellent.
Yeah, I love this card a lot. So that's why
Yeah,
I
we're
try to
we're
jam it in
we're a,
everywhere.
yeah, we're fans.
Thanks,
This is on
Wizards.
this is on our list. Thanks for Portal of Phyrexia. We're grateful for it. So in the next section, we like to talk about the goals of the deck. We like to do the spotlight on the individual specific goals of whatever deck we're talking about. This deck is unique in that way. It definitely has some hoops to jump through, and we're going to talk about the cards that Zombie included in the deck to get through those hoops. So tell us what the different goals that you see this deck having are.
So the goals that I have for the deck are good creatures to sacrifice, um, other ways to emerge creatures, the good fatties, and then other ways to use said fatties. Like, let me be a little bit more specific on like the second goal because that's kind of ambiguous. What I mean by that is like ways that I'm using herbs, like other ways of emerging creatures are like maybe I might steal your creature or make a token copy of something to then sacrifice the token. So I'm not necessarily net even every time. Like I'm net positive on
Right.
emerging the emerge process.
And I
So
think that was that. I think that was a positive change when we were kind of brainstorming the
yeah,
deck together. Was adding a critical mass of copy effects to the
yep.
deck, copy effects that also copy the mana value of cards, so that you can then use the copies to emerge. Like that really made this deck really sing,
Hmm.
because as you said, you get to keep the original card, but you have the benefit of its mana value, and you get an even bigger creature on the back of it. Turned out to be a pretty good choice.
Alrighty, so Tim, what was your pick for good sacrifice creature?
So no one's ever heard of this card before. It's called Solemn Simulacrum. It
What's
costs
that do?
4 mana. It's a 2/2 artifact golem. When it enters, you can search for a basic land, put it into play tapped, and when it dies, you can draw a card.
What?
Why hasn't everybody been playing with this card
This
always?
card is amazing. Now I'm gonna tie in a couple of other creatures that kind of fit this same build. Circuit Mender is and there's another reprint of this with a different name, and that's Filigree Familiar. Um, they both have enters, and when it dies, I draw a card. Circuit Mender and Filigree Familiar. When it enters the battlefield, I gain 2 life, and when it dies or leaves, I draw a card.
Yeah, they are
So
practically the same card. They have different creature types, but those are 3 mana cards that do something, quite
yeah,
similar. So,
I feel like they
yeah,
fit very well in that same category.
I think all of them do. I think Sad Robot does the best of all of them
Sad Robot's
because
definitely the best out of all of them,
right,
but I
because
felt
it
like they should be talked about as well.
Right. Because it digs the land out of your deck. We all know why this card is good. I actually think like and Zami and I have talked about this that we see this card less nowadays. Like it
Yeah.
used to be an absolute auto include in almost any deck because it just does what you're kind of looking to do in Commander. It gives you a little bit of ramp, it draws you a card,
It
puts body on
replaces
the field,
itself. Yep.
can be played in any deck, right? But it actually like with the power creep we've experienced and the synergies that exist these days, really there's lots of decks that don't want this card anymore. But this
Once
deck wants this
7 copies
card.
of this card if you could.
Yes, as many as it can get.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first pick for good sacrifice
I
creatures. How
I
about
mean I love that card. So the card that I picked is a kind of a weird include, but I bet you none of you guys heard of this card unless if you played Mirrodin back in the day during draft. So I picked Oxida Golem. It's a 6 mana 3/2 with haste. Um, the other important keyword that I haven't mentioned yet is affinity for mountains. So what this says to me is I play this card for free, and it makes the next creature I cast cost 6 less. You know what else is really great? I have 2 red and an Oxida Golem. I have a commander.
that's right.
Turns out the math works out really good here. I love this
So
card
let's
in this
see.
list.
So does that get you on? Does that get you? You can't cast it on two. So if you go mountain on one, two, and three, you cast Oxida on three,
Hmm.
and then it is enough by itself to get you to your commander the next
Right.
turn. So
So
this is
yeah.
another one of the creatures on that list, and I'd love to kind of look at the list and see how many different creatures do this. It really is a critical mass of creatures that if you cast them on three, it means you're getting your commander on four, and
And
this is one of
sometimes
them.
I don't always want my commander on 4. Sometimes I
Sure.
want to build up a couple of creatures so if something bad happens, I still have something going on. Because not like having my commander and no other creatures is kind of bad. Because I'm not really going to want to emerge my commander. Now, don't get me wrong, I have. I have emerged my commander, which costs 9, which then makes like a card like Kozilek the Great Distortion
Right.
only costs 2 colorless.
Hmm.
Seems pretty solid. So, but yeah, this is just a really all around great card. Cards that I'm looking for are things that I can get out cheap and then have benefit, or cards that are just free that don't necessarily do anything, but they're free, which makes my other creatures cheaper. So, like, Oxida Golem makes Meteor Golem only cost 1. I would love to pay 1 mana to destroy any of your permanents. Seems great to me because I don't
It
care
does.
about this card. Like, you destroy my Oxida Golem, I'm like, okay, that seems like a weird removal spell. So it seems like it's going to be pretty safe, unless if it's a board wipe. So
Yeah, in so many other situations, this is a terrible card.
so bad.
This is the definition of like absolute bin rubbish, like most of the time. But here it creates all these incredibly accelerated board states.
Oh,
So it's fantastic in this deck and nowhere else.
who would have thought in a world where I would be having a podcast and we're talking about how good Oxida Golem is?
What an amazing card.
What a good card, people. Alrighty, I think we've talked enough about Oxida Golem, so we're gonna go into our next section, which is other ways to emerge creatures. So, Tim, why
So
don't you go ahead and take it away? Explain yourself before why you picked this card.
I won't.
Nope,
No,
fine.
not
Tell
at
me
all.
what the card is.
So I actually I looked at zombies goals and I interpreted it a little bit different, but I actually just like it through my interpretation of what he was saying, the goal of other ways to emerge creatures. I actually ended up with something that I think lines up with the spirit of what he was saying, because the question is, how can I get big creatures onto the board that I can then chain into other big creatures with the emerge cost once my commander is on the board? And this card may be maybe the single best card in the deck. And this is it's kind of a boogeyman in the commander format for other reasons, but here it does, it
I
fills
use
this
it
niche
very
in a
differently
specific
here.
way. That's right. So we're talking about sneak attack.
Mm,
So sneak
sneak
attack
attack.
is a 3 and 1 red enchantment, which cannot be reduced with emerge. So it actually costs 3 and a red.
You're right. You're
Um,
right. I
s-
should make a
so
creature
for
version of this. Oh
for
wait, there
one
is.
red, you may activate this enchantment, and you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So you can, for 1 red mana, play a creature for free, and then it's going to die at the end of the turn. But guess what? This deck wants to sacrifice it to emerge costs anyway, and there's lots of really great ETB creatures,
Mhm.
enter the battlefield effects on creatures that make this well worth it, especially when you are refilling your hand with various different cards, and then allowing you to, because again, the first one you pay for red, and then that one may make your next creature free if the commander's on board.
Right.
That one sticks around.
Yep. So I do have a creature version of this. It is Perforos Bronze Blooded. It's a
Sure.
one red enchantment creature, legendary creature god. He's a 7/6. He gives other creatures you control haste. He's not a creature unless if you have 5 red pips, and you can pay 3 to put a red creature or an artifact creature from your hand onto the battlefield, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So, same deal. I can emerge Perforos out even if I don't have the 5 red pips, because everywhere that he is, that's not on the battlefield, he is a creature. So, um, I could see doing it. I mean, the mana ends up being one less if I had if I had Perforos pop out of the Sad Robots chest, it's only costing me 4 mana for the first creature, but like after that, it becomes very mana expensive because 3 mana is a lot. So like, what makes sneak attack so good is it's only 1 red for a discount of whatever creature I decide to put in. So like 1 red gets me a 6 mana combustible Gearhulk that I then sacrifice for a 1 mana meteor golem that sticks around or something. Um,
Right. And you can always sneak attack the thing in, get the attack in, and then do all of that later.
mhm.
I mean, so
Right.
it
So,
really does allow you to get the full value out of that creature. So in this deck, sneak attack becomes mana advantage.
oh, in such an extreme way. So I think we're gonna go into my next card here. The card that I picked is Hideous Taskmaster. The reason why I picked this card is it's a 7 mana, 7 mana with quotation fingers here. 7 mana Eldrazi, has Devoid. It's a 7/2. When you cast this spell for each opponent, gain control of up to one target creature that player controls till end of turn. Untap those creatures, they gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 till end of turn. And then it also has Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. Boy, let me tell you, I like I emerged this out for 1 mana. Okay. I steal your creatures, attack with your creatures, then emerge creatures. They don't even have to cost more. Like, I would be okay with doing emerging your commander into a Patron of the Ash or
Yeah.
Sad Robot or
Yep.
anything, because I'm
Yep.
stealing your creatures, doing a heck of a lot of damage on yours, and then like in the next episode of Commander with Randos, boy, Hideous Taskmaster did some nasty, nasty work. Um,
Yeah, and it ends up being mana advantage. That's what that's what this commander does, is it makes every creature that you have on board create mana advantage. So stealing one creature from each person, I don't remember. I think mine was a 5 drop.
yep,
The other guy's was a 5 drop,
two
and I
five drops,
forget
and
what the
it was a 5 drop, but it tapped for so much mana because it was the
oh,
creature
so
that
you
I stole three
right, right.
creatures, and then I stole a creature that taps for the amount of mana equal to the highest power of creatures that entered the battlefield, which is 7. So I tapped it, added 7 mana, emerged your Gandalf, and then emerged the other person's commander for like so much thinking value.
Right. So like again, just to kind of, without the specifics of that situation, if each opponent has a 5 mana creature, you get Hideous Taskmaster out, and you get 15 mana.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you get to attack with those creatures first and then turn them into mana value. So this is almost single targeted removal in this deck.
Yep.
Because it does the old trick where you steal your opponent, have the threaten effect, steal your opponent's creature, and then you sacrifice it because you've almost always got a merge on board because you've either got your commander in the command zone and
Then
you
I'm
can
just
emerge your
emerging my commander. Like,
Right. And then if you've got more creatures and actually if you're again hell bent at that point, you emerge your commander, draw your cards, now you've got more creatures to emerge. Man, Hideous Taskmaster, this is the home for this card. It is so good here.
where it does crazy amount of work. So I think we're gonna start talking about. I mean, we talked about some good fatties, but there's
Yeah.
even more good fatties that we're gonna talk about
There
now. So
there
Tim,
there
what's your
are.
first good fatty?
Yeah, the first one for me is Artisan Okazalek. So this is a 9 mana Eldrazi. It's a 10/9. When you cast it, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It also has Annihilator too. So this again, it's a cast trigger, so you can only get it on cast. But I have to point out that we were talking earlier about I don't necessarily want to emerge my commander. Here's the one place where you can.
Yep.
So you emerge your commander into this, and then it can get your commander back, and you can just continue going from there.
I
Not
don't
to
think I
mention the
could get
fact,
it back because I would have to put the target on the stack before it resolves. So it
I think
I don't know if
I
the
think you
creature
can
goes into the
because
graveyard until after the spell's finish resolving. That would be you would have to see how
no,
emerge.
it's part of the cost. It's part of the cost. So you're paying the
Right,
cost
but
before you're
I
putting
have to choose my
before
cast
you're putting
trigger.
no before you're putting the spell on the stack. You're paying the cost.
Well,
So
we'll
you're
look
not
that up
putting the
too.
trigger. Yeah, you're not putting the cast trigger on the stack. You do have to have a target, but I'm fairly confident that one works. And tear me to shreds if you need to, but I'm pretty sure that's how that
I
one
mean,
works.
tear us to
Because
shreds anyway because we love
right,
comments in our comment
yeah,
section. So
right. So, but even if it doesn't, like let's talk about a world where where the um where you have something else to get back. Like this is just
right,
one of those places where you could turn your commander into another creature, and again, that just puts your commander back in the command zone.
yeah. I mean,
And so
just look how many other
this gets
good
a different
cards we have. Like,
right.
look at all the great fatties that we've talked about already. Um,
So this one just, I mean, in a deck that kills all of its creatures, that sacrifices all of its creatures. This is a way to get creatures back from the graveyard, and that's an enormous amount of value.
uh, all right. So while I'm looking up the rulings for that, Tim, why don't you go ahead and go into? Oh wait, that was yours. So we're gonna go into mine real quick.
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
and this card's just silly. We're gonna talk about Cityscape Leveler. Um, again, it has a cast trigger, but it's also an attack trigger. So it is a 8 mana, 8/8 trampler. Says when you cast this spell and whenever Cityscape Leveler attacks, destroy up to one target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a Power Stone token. It also has Unearth. So it's great removal. It's reusable removal. Turns out discounting my next creature for 8, like, oh, I don't know, Kozilek the Great Distortion, seems really good. And then again, I'll just bring it back with Artisans of Kozilek or something along those lines, where it's like this deck just chains into itself so well. And yeah, man, Cityscape Leveler is just a really powerful card. So what do you got to say
Yeah,
about it?
again. I think that I'm a huge fan of this card, just generically speaking. This is another one of those cards from Brothers War, right next to Portal of Phyrexia. These cards came out together. They were the two big high mana value artifacts from that set. That's what we all wanted, right? Were these big gigantic monster robots, and this was the monster robot from the set. It did not disappoint. I think it does. It is fantastic, and the tiny downside of giving your opponent a power stone is very small, especially um especially in the multiplayer format. Like it just, if it were giving everybody one, it would be one thing. But I mean, the fact that this can also come back from the graveyard, so if you're sacrificing it and you happen to have the mana lying around to just bring it back, there's a lot of value on this one, and it is a great source for single targeted removal.
Okay. I don't know if this is what we're talking about. It says the creature chosen to be sacrificed is still on the battlefield up through the time that you activate mana abilities. Ability may affect the spell's cost, be activated to generate mana, and so on. However, if it has an ability that triggers when the spell is cast, it will have been sacrificed before that ability can trigger. I don't know if that's exactly what we're looking for.
Let's read that last line again.
Um, it says it will have been sacrificed before the ability can trigger. It says, hold on. So, however, if it has an ability that triggers when the spell is cast, okay, so yeah, it would be in the graveyard beforehand because, um, like if it says if you cast the creature and you do this, the ability wouldn't trigger because it wouldn't be there. So no, I think you're absolutely right. It would be in the graveyard before, so I could then choose my commander to get back. I mean,
Right. So in that situation, if you've got Artisan and Kozilek in your hand on turn 4, when all these things that we're talking about get you to your commander at that turn 4 mark, you're casting your commander, emerging Artisan out, getting your commander back, and continuing the loop if you want to. That's not
because
overtly that powerful, but
right.
get those two things on the board at that point on turn 4 is actually really, really
Well,
terrifying.
because then I can
Because
turn
basically,
artisan into a cityscape leveler.
right.
So I think it's actually honestly, I mean, we're talking Magic Christmas Land, but like I think a cityscape leveler and a 6/6 flying creature is pretty good on turn 4. Just
It is.
just putting it out there.
So the last goal that we're going to talk about is other ways to use the big creatures. And so we talked a little bit about this before, but what we came up with when kind of brewing this deck was one of the ways to break it is to create token copies of creatures with their mana values intact, so that you can then use them to emerge. So my choice in this column, we already talked about Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, because if you've been a Magic player for any amount of time, you've probably seen this card. So we wanted to talk about the ones that are a little bit more fun, or at least newer, perhaps. And my choice is Calamity Galloping Inferno. This is from the set where everyone wears cowboy hats. It is 4 and 2 red. It's a 4/6 legendary creature horse mount. It
Nay.
has haste. So it's important. So it has saddle 1. It's important to know what mount does before I read the rest of the text. So mount works kind of like vehicles works, only slower. You can only saddle as a sorcery, and saddling a creature basically means you have to meet its saddle cost with the power of any number of creatures, and you can saddle it with more than one creature if you want to. In this case, it doesn't benefit you to do so. So basically, you tap another creature with power 1 or greater, and it gets on the back of the horse. That's essentially what happens. And then, when Calamity attacks while saddled, choose a non-legendary creature that's saddled at this turn, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of it, sacrifice that token at the end step, repeat this process once. So lots of good options for this. We already talked about several of them. If you got Combustible Gear Hulk, which I've seen Zombie do in this deck, is put a Gear Hulk on the back of Calamity. That was an enormous amount of fun. Sandstone Oracle's a good hit. Meteor Golem's a good hit. Terror of the Peaks is an incredibly good hit.
Trumpeting
So any
Carnosaur is an amazing hit.
but
Like,
a Carnosaur, yeah, there's so many great, and you make two token copies, and the original actually saddled the creature, so it's tapped and not attacking. It's not in danger. The
mhm.
two other ones come in, and they come in tapped and attacking, and if they have ETB triggers, you get to use them all.
And
So
then
I
second
love
main phase, I
Calamity.
get to sacrifice them. Oh my
Right.
god, I
So
get to sacrifice them later.
yes. So this card, I love it here. It costs 6 mana. It's probably a little like it's a little just for those players who want to do the really janky thing and have it go off. This is probably not a super competitive card, but boy, it's fun.
Man, you gotta have a little jank in your life, right? Like, yes,
This is
there is an infinite combo in this deck. Okay, I get it,
Right. Right.
but let's have some fun until then, right? Like, I'm not
Yeah.
searching for the
Yeah.
combos, so
We do that a lot. We put at least one infinite combo in just about every deck because you need to be able to win. Like, I'm not necessarily searching for that combo, not going out of my way for it. My Samwise deck accidentally gets 4 or 5 card infinite combos all the time. I'm not trying to get there. It just does that if you
it
let me get a
does
board state.
happen.
But I think it's important to have a way to win. So, like, don't play with a lot of tutors and get to your infinite immediately, but have it in there so a game can come to an end. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that at all.
So, yeah, man, the card's just so much. That card is just so much fun. It's silly.
Yep.
Can you just imagine a giant robot riding on the back of a fire horse? Seems pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
So, the card that I picked for this is Felden of the Third Path. The reason why I picked this card is because I am sacrificing a lot of creatures, so my graveyard is gonna fill up a little bit. So like, I'm gonna want like ways to get them back. And let's be real, red is not the best reanimate color, but like I have my ways. So like, I'm gonna read Felden for you here. It's 1 and 2 red for a legendary creature, human artificer. He's a 2/3. I can pay 2 and a red, tap it to create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So I'm going to get a big dumb fatty, attack you with it, sacrifice that creature, and then have something permanent. And the fact that it doesn't exile makes it
I was just thinking
pretty
that.
sweet.
I don't know why I like this card has been in so many pre-cons at this point. Like Wizards wants us to play with this card, okay? So sometimes you just got to let your evil overlords have their way, right? So I mean, let's just let WotC have what they want. They want us to play Felden in the Third Path. Here's a home for it that is incredibly fitting. I don't know why it never occurred to me that like you could just keep redoing the same thing each turn. It doesn't remove the thing from your graveyard. You can just keep doing it. I
Yeah.
love that.
So I there is another card I want to kind of put in the same vein as Felden, and that's Mimic Vat. Okay, if you don't know what
Yeah.
Mimic Vat does, it basically is the same thing. It's a 3 mana artifact. It says whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard, and then I can pay 3 and tap it to create a token that's a copy of the card exiled on Mimic Vat. It gains haste and exiled at the beginning of the next end step. So I emerge a creature, put it on Mimic Vat. I pay 3. I have another copy of the creature I just emerged.
Yeah.
So it's I think Mimic Vat's a little bit better, but I just like Felden because he's cool.
Yeah, I mean, better in certain circumstances, sure. And Mimic Vat's one of those funny cards where it's like when you read it, it is incredibly confusing when you say the words out loud.
Right.
But ultimately, like you tuck a card under it, and then for 3 mana, you get to make a token copy of that card. So if the card costs 9, you're
Yeah.
benefiting by 6 mana at that point. So if you get something like Meteor Golem under it,
Which is terrifying
then
in itself.
right. So anything that hasn't enters the battlefield, there's definitely some very scary things to put under there. I mean, but both of those cards, all of the copy cards that we're talking about, actually, Calamity, Kiki Jiki, Felden, this. Kiki's the best because it's got haste, and it like once it's on the board, if you've got the other pieces on it, you're probably going to win at that point. But these other ones are a
Like
little
I have a
slower,
Splinter
and they're
Twin
all
too. That's kind
sure,
of
but
just
they're
as
all very
fast.
they're
Yeah.
all very fragile, is my point.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to usually make the dice to the removal argument, but all of these cards are really like if you tuck a card under Mimivat and somebody blows it up, and now you're out
It's
two
gone
cards.
forever, yeah. But
So,
it also
but
doesn't
I
have
mean,
to
it's
be my
opportunity.
creature either. So like if your
That's
creature
right.
dies and it happens to have a big mana value, I might just take it myself.
There you go.
So like there's a couple cards that I wanted to mention that we probably should have mentioned earlier. Well, just one in particular. For the card draw section, this card is amazing. It is Imposing Grandeur. It is a 5 mana sorcery. Each player may discard their hand and draw cards equal to the greatest mana value of commanders they own on the battlefield or in the command zone. Boy, let me tell you, this is just discard my hand, draw 9.
It's really, again, that's a card that in a lot of other situations you look at it and go, I would never play that card. But in a deck whose commander costs 9 or has a mana value of 9, yeah, that
So,
seems okay.
so I cast this card, right? And I was like, by the way, would you like to discard your hand and only draw 3 cards? No. Would you
Yeah,
like to discard your
yeah.
hand and draw 0 cards? No, because he had it in his graveyard. And then I'm like, hey, do you want to draw 2 cards? No.
Old
Okay.
Samwise Gamgee over there, like, no,
I
I don't. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna draw 9 cards. Thank you very much. Because like this is
Dang.
just so much better than wheel. Because like they're gonna a lot of the times people are running lower end mana value creatures for their commander nowadays. So like
That's right.
I'm gonna take advantage of that. And drawing 9
Yeah.
cards in this deck is absolutely silly. So
Boy,
I
it
just
is
wanted to put
good.
that
No
card out
question.
there. Because it's a really fun card, and I probably
Oh.
a fun card.
All right, so to move towards wrapping up for today, our last bit here is to talk about cards that we think that Zombie might consider for this deck in the future. So we each pick one and talk a little bit about it. So my pick for this deck leans into the threat and effects a little bit more with Molten Primordial. It is a 5 and 2 red 6/4 haste avatar creature. When Molten Primordial enters, for each opponent, gain control of up to one target creature they control. Untap those creatures, they gain haste. So we've already talked about how amazingly powerful Hideous
Right.
Taskmaster is. Here we've got it on an enters the on an in an enters the battlefield effect rather than a cast trigger, which makes it more easily repeatable with all the other stuff that's in the deck. So
That and
I
also
would
I'm
say,
just gonna pay 1 and sneak attack this thing in, steal your stuff,
yeah.
and sack your creatures. Thanks.
Right. Right. Or, maybe you've got Calamity and you copy this and steal a whole bunch more creatures. Like there's so many ways to abuse this. And I know, like, really, I think that the threat and effects, stealing people's stuff can be be a bad feels kind of situation, but I really, the more I play the game, the more I think that's definitely a legit strategy. And if people get hurt feelings that exists, well, it exists in the game. It exists in a lot of different forms. So, red stealing your creature so it can sacrifice them is a legitimate strategy for single targeted removal. So, there's a part of me, this is like a dirt cheap card too, isn't it?
It's like
Like,
$1.
yeah,
It's
yeah, like a
75
dollar.
cents.
It'd be a very easy include, and again,
I think I
it's got the
will,
mana
honestly.
value.
Yeah.
It
Like it's
just
just so good.
we saw what Hideous Taskmaster could do in that last game, and I'm looking at this and going, you want this on it? You want both, no question, but you
Absolutely.
want this on an ETB effect so that you can copy it with Kiki and with Calamity and with all these other things we're talking about. So definitely think it's worth looking at.
Oh, definitely. I mean, at this point, it would just be okay. Well, what am I gonna remove? I mean, like, because
That's
let's
right.
be real, like cutting cards is surprisingly difficult. And I mean, I have a lot of cards in here that are are just like draw cards that I could probably like.
Yeah.
I could probably get rid of Valakut Awakening. Card's great. It's just basically a wheel for myself.
Yep.
But like Seize the Spotlights is another like threaten all their stuff, or it's just a free spell that draws me 3 cards. And like
Yep.
I would definitely want to keep Seize the Spotlight, but like I could see getting rid of like Valakut Awakening or something like uh Mirage Mirror or something like that.
Sure.
So great card. I really liked your pick. I just oversaw it, I think. Like it just
Yeah.
completely just like went past my radar. So the card that I picked, this card was not out yet when I actually built the deck. Because this is from the Assassin's Creed set. And it is the Captillion Triad. It is a 10 mana legendary creature, God Artificer. It says, those who came before. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each historic card in your graveyard. Surprisingly, a lot of historic things. Also, emerging it makes it a lot cheaper. And it says, It has an ability. It says exile any number of historic cards from your graveyard with total mana value 30 or greater. And then you get an emblem. Creatures you control have base power 9/9. I think it's just a good game finisher.
Yeah.
And I mean, 30 is a lot. I'm not filling it up that much, but like Oxid Golem is an easy 6 that goes towards it.
I'd love to see this go off once. Like, just, I mean, if for no other reason, just to be in the room when it happens, like I'd love to see it happen once. Because I don't know if there are at this point any other Planeswalker cards that have the word emblem on them.
Yeah,
This might be the first one.
I think it is.
So very interesting card design to go in that direction to create something, because emblems are a bit controversial, right? Because you cannot interact with them. So once somebody has an emblem, like they have that emblem. So it's not like it's a enchantment that can be removed later on. Maybe this is an indicator that we're going to get stuff that interacts with emblems, but there probably aren't enough of them for that to happen yet. But still, like, I would be very fascinated just to see this happen.
Yeah, the only problem with this card is it has to be a historic card to go towards the mana value. And I'm like looking at the list. I mean, I have some high mana value historic stuff.
It'd be artifacts. I mean, you don't have a lot of legendaries, so I mean, I guess you have Kozilek. If you were playing with more,
Kozilek is already a third of it. So like I could see getting like with 4 cards.
More, yeah.
This is exile 4 cards from my graveyard to make all my creatures 9/9 for the rest of the game. I mean, it seems pretty solid. I think it's just it's a fun idea. I don't know how good this card is, and I mean, there's no there's like no downside to having just a whole bunch of 9/9s, right? Like,
no downside whatsoever. So I'd be very fascinated to see this card actually perform. So
yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, maybe I'll put it in the list. This one I would rather have, like, if I were to choose one of the two, I'm choosing Molten Primordial over the Captillion Triad.
You just know, that Molten Primordial is going to do what you want it to do in that deck. Like it is right in line with all the other things that we've seen really work.
Right. So,
okay. I think that's enough for us for today. So, friends, opponents, dragons out there burninating the countryside, thank you so very kindly for joining us on the Head Games Commander podcast. We appreciate you and your support for our content. Remember, you can help out the show by watching our podcast and all of our other videos on our YouTube channel, joining our streams on both YouTube and Twitch, and by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Put some comments down below. We love that. Links are all in the description.
I would love to see us hit 100 subscribers rather quickly, and I think you guys can do it. Who are watching this right? Meow. Do it. I know. You haven't done it yet. Okay, we got there. Thank you for hitting that button. I almost cried. But before we scoop things up, we want to hear from you, the think tank. What commanders are you playing from Modern Horizon 3? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for playing along with us and have a wonderful day. Bye.